Morning comes without softness here. The first light does not spill. It cuts. It draws long lines across sand and stone, turning the ground into a pale, endless stage where nothing can pretend it was never there. The air is cool for a brief moment, almost gentle, as if the night is still holding on. Then the wind arrives, sliding low across the surface, lifting dust in thin, restless ribbons that move like warnings. Everything in this place is exposed, and everything survives anyway. Small shapes appear at the edge of the light, quick, cautious, never lingering. Insects vanish beneath cracks in the ground. A bird lands, listens, then lifts away again, as if the air itself carries information. Even the plants seem reluctant, sparse, and stubborn, growing only where they can, refusing to waste energy on beauty. The desert does not offer comfort. It offers clarity. Out here, the difference between life and death is rarely dramatic. It is often quiet, built from tiny decisions made in moments that no one remembers. A step taken too early, a pause held too long, a choice that feels harmless until it repeats, until it becomes a pattern. That is how the desert reshapes instinct, because instinct is not a promise. It is a memory. A set of rules written in the body over time, rules that work until the world changes faster than the body can adjust. In most places, nature changes slowly enough for instinct to keep up. In the desert, change can arrive overnight. Heat can tighten the land into scarcity. Wind can erase the signs that once guided survival. Water can disappear, forcing every living thing into the open. And when the land changes, the old rules become dangerous. The desert does not punish the strongest first. It punishes the predictable. When you move the way you always move, the land learns you. When you hunt the way you always hunt, the land exposes you. Here, survival belongs to what can adapt without announcing that it has adapted, what can shift its rhythm before the world demands it. As the sun rises, the cool air dissolves quickly. Shadows shrink, losing depth, losing mercy. The ground begins to radiate heat, turning the space between stones into a furnace that will only grow heavier as the day climbs. Somewhere beyond the visible horizon, life is already adjusting, feeding early, moving less, conserving what little energy it has. Nothing wastes motion in the desert, because every movement is a signal. Every sound is an invitation. Every hesitation is a cost. The wind keeps moving indifferent. The light keeps advancing unstoppable. And somewhere in this open, unforgiving world, a single animal will face a moment so small it could be missed entirely. A moment where the old instinct should have been enough, but it won't be. Not because the animal is weak, not because it lacks experience, but because the desert is quietly becoming something else, and the body has not fully caught up yet. In the wild, the most dangerous moments are not always the loud ones. They are the ones where nothing happens, when something should have. Across open landscapes like this, life organizes itself around a simple exchange. One side searches, the other watches. One moves to close distance, the other moves to create it. Every heartbeat, every step, every breath fits into this silent negotiation. Nothing is wasted because nothing can be. For predators, the law is timing. For prey, the law is awareness. And between them lies a narrow window where the balance briefly tips. In most ecosystems, this exchange follows patterns refined over generations. Predators rely on surprise speed or strength. Prey relies on early detection, group vigilance, and escape routes etched into memory. These rules are not written, but they are learned early and reinforced relentlessly. Those that misunderstand them rarely get a second lesson. Out here, the rules are harsher because the margins are thinner. There is no dense forest to break lines of sight. No tall grass to swallow movement. No shadows that last long enough to hide mistakes. The land is open, stripped down to essentials. What remains is a space where everything is visible and therefore vulnerable. For a predator to succeed here, it must solve a specific problem: how to cross open ground without being detected. Speed alone is rarely enough. A chase across exposed terrain favors endurance, and endurance favors numbers or size. Strength draws attention. Attention draws competition. Competition reshapes outcomes quickly and brutally. That is why most successful hunts here end before they truly begin. They are decided in the approach. Distance matters more than force. Sound matters more than aggression. Commitment matters more than persistence. Predators that survive learn to read not just their prey, but the entire environment. Wind direction becomes information. Light becomes risk. Even stillness has meaning. A hunt does not start when muscles tense. It starts when conditions align well enough that the hunt will likely end without escalation. This is the first law: do not be seen before the moment of contact. The second law follows naturally: do not remain after success. In open ecosystems, the kill itself is not the greatest danger. What follows is, movement draws eyes, sound draws bodies. Scavengers and larger predators do not need to witness the hunt, they only need to arrive before the hunter can withdraw. Many predators survive not by defending their success, but by abandoning it at the first sign of attention. Victory here is brief. Prey species understand this as well. They are shaped by the same exposure. They feed with heads, raised ears, scanning bodies angled for immediate retreat. Groups spread awareness across many individuals, reducing blind spots and compressing response time. Escape does not require understanding the threat, only reacting faster than it closes distance. This creates a system where hesitation is punished on both sides. For prey, hesitation means death. For predators, hesitation means exposure. And yet the desert complicates this balance. Scarcity reshapes behavior long before it becomes visible. When water recedes, movement concentrates. When food thins, attention sharpens. Prey becomes more nervous, less predictable. Predators are forced to travel farther to hunt at less ideal times, to take risks they would normally avoid. Under these conditions, the old laws begin to strain. A predator that commits too early reveals itself. A predator that waits too long risks starvation. The window narrows until timing becomes almost impossible to perfect. This is where instinct is tested. Instinct is not foresight. It is repetition made efficient. It works because the world usually behaves the way it did before. But when conditions shift faster than memory can adjust, instinct begins to misfire, not dramatically, but subtly. A pause lasts half a second longer. A calculation overrides reflex. The body hesitates not out of fear, but out of experience. Experience, too, is a double-edged rule. Every predator that survives long enough carries memory in its movement. Memory of exposure, memory of pursuit, memory of escapes that succeeded and those that nearly failed. Over time, these memories shape restraint. They teach when not to act. They reduce reckless commitment. They preserve invisibility. But restraint has its own cost. In a system built on timing, excessive caution erodes opportunity. The predator that waits for perfect conditions may find that such conditions no longer exist. The environment does not pause to accommodate hesitation. It continues to compress options until action becomes unavoidable. This is the final law the desert enforces. Adaptation must keep pace with change. Not strength, not speed, not even intelligence. Only relevance. A strategy that once guaranteed survival can become a liability if the world shifts beneath it. The desert does not announce this shift. It reveals it through hunger, through pressure, through moments that arrive slightly out of sync with expectation. Some predators respond by becoming more aggressive. Others, by withdrawing further into invisibility. Both choices carry risk. Both can succeed for a time. What matters is not which rule is followed, but when the rule stops working. The laws of survival here are not fixed. They are conditional. They depend on timing, environment, and the subtle interaction between memory and necessity. Those that recognize this early adjust quietly. Those that recognize it late adjust desperately. And somewhere within this unforgiving system, a single hunter is approaching that realization, not through failure, but through delay. Through moments when instinct suggests action, but experience advises restraint. The desert does not judge this conflict. It only waits to see which side wins. In the early hours before heat tightens the land, the hunter appears only as a suggestion against the terrain. A low silhouette shaped by sand and stone, moving with the kind of economy that comes from long familiarity with open ground. Nothing about its presence demands attention. That in itself is the expectation. This is how it has always survived. Its body is built for precision rather than excess. Limbs extend just far enough to close distance without waste. Muscles hold tension quietly, without the tremor of urgency. The head stays low, eyes forward, scanning not just for prey, but for shifts, subtle changes in the land that signal danger before it takes form. There is a rhythm to this movement, one refined through repetition. Step. Pause. Listen. Advance again. Each action feeds into the next, forming a pattern that has worked before. The desert recognizes this rhythm not as a threat, but as something that belongs. That is the illusion of safety. In the distance, prey moves with predictable caution. Not relaxed, but not alarmed either. Their spacing suggests awareness without panic. Heads lift occasionally, ears angle outward. Escape routes remain open. This is the balance the hunter expects, a balance where instinct alone is enough to guide the approach. The body prepares automatically, muscles align, breathing shortens. The distance begins to close not hurriedly, but decisively. This is the phase where everything still feels familiar, where memory reinforces confidence. Every previous success whispers that nothing has changed, that this moment will resolve the way it always has. Expectation builds here. Not excitement, not hunger, expectation. The hunter has learned to trust these early stages. They are rarely wrong. If something is going to fail, it usually announces itself sooner, with a sudden movement, an unexpected sound, a shift in wind. None of that happens now. The desert remains quiet, open, compliant. This is where instinct usually takes over. The final approach is meant to be automatic. Thought dissolves into motion. Calculation gives way to commitment. This is the rule written deepest into the body. When alignment is achieved, act. But something interrupts the sequence, not externally, internally. The movement slows by a fraction. Not enough to be noticed by anything else. Enough to matter. The hunter pauses not because danger is visible, but because it is possible. The memory of exposure unannounced, uninvited surfaces without warning. This hesitation is new, not in isolation, but in timing. Before restraint arrived earlier, guiding approach paths, dictating angles, shaping withdrawal plans. Now it appears at the final threshold where it does not belong. The body holds tension longer than it should, as if waiting for confirmation that never arrives. The prey shifts slightly. Nothing dramatic, just enough to narrow the window. The moment passes. The hunter withdraws, dissolving back into the land with the same care that brought it forward. From the outside, the sequence looks complete. Approach, reassessment, retreat. No failure, no error. Just another unreadable exchange in a landscape full of them. But internally, something is misaligned. This was not a forced retreat, not a response to threat. It was a decision made in silence based on an expectation that no longer fits cleanly with the present moment. The body followed a rule that once preserved survival, but now delays it. The desert does not react. That is what makes this dangerous. There is no immediate consequence. No chase. No alarm. Hunger does not surge all at once. Energy does not collapse. Everything appears stable enough to continue as before. This is how patterns are allowed to form quietly without resistance. The hunter moves on unseen and intact. Its invisibility remains perfect. Its caution remains justified. But beneath that surface, expectation has shifted. Instinct no longer leads without negotiation. Each step forward now carries a subtle question. Is this still the right moment? And with that question comes delay. With delay comes repetition, and repetition in the desert becomes exposure of a different kind. The expectation that once guaranteed success, that instinct alone would resolve the moment, has begun to erode. Not because the hunter has weakened, but because the world it responds to is no longer entirely familiar. This chapter is not about failure. It is about the first crack in certainty. And in a place where certainty is the foundation of survival, even a small crack can widen quickly, especially when nothing forces it to close. Not because the land is generous, but because scarcity compresses movement. Prey no longer drifts across wide spaces. It passes through them quickly, funneling along routes shaped by necessity rather than comfort. The hunter recognizes this shift immediately. Patterns tighten, timing accelerates. Moments do not linger the way they once did. This should make decisions easier. Instead, it sharpens the pressure. The approach begins cleanly. Wind moves across the ground at a shallow angle, pulling scent away rather than carrying it forward. Sound dissolves into the uneven surface. Light sits high enough to flatten shadows, reducing contrast, just enough for movement to blend rather than break. Everything aligns again. The hunter lowers its body further, compressing against the terrain until it becomes an extension of it. Distance closes in controlled increments. Each step is placed with precision learned through repetition. The prey remains unaware, focused on its own narrow concerns. Heat thirst, the constant scanning for threats that rarely resolve. This is the moment instinct was built for. The body prepares to transition from approach to action. Muscles tighten in sequence. Balance shifts forward. The final distance is measured not in meters, but in heartbeats. And then the rhythm slips, not dramatically, not enough to trigger alarm, just enough to disrupt the internal sequence that usually ends in commitment. The hunter pauses, not fully stopping, not fully advancing. The body holds tension past the point where release should follow. Time stretches unnaturally. In that brief extension, the land intervenes. A minor sound carries farther than expected. Not loud, not sudden, but enough to register. The prey lifts its head. Awareness sharpens, spreading through the group like a quiet signal. Spacing tightens. Escape routes realign. The window narrows without collapsing completely. The hunter still has a chance. This is where the deviation becomes visible. Instead of closing the remaining distance, the hunter recalculates. The pause deepens. Memory asserts itself, uninvited but persuasive. Past exposure, past pursuits, the cost of being seen once too often. The calculation shifts from, can this succeed, to what happens if it does. The prey senses the shift. Movement changes not into panic, but readiness. Muscles coil. Attention fixes. The difference between ignorance and awareness is subtle but decisive. The opportunity does not disappear. It transforms into risk. The hunter withdraws. Again, the retreat is controlled, silent, efficient. From the outside, it appears deliberate, even wise. There is no chase, no alarm. The prey resumes movement after a moment, tension dissipating as the threat dissolves back into absence. Nothing breaks, and that is the problem. The desert offers no immediate penalty for this delay. Hunger does not spike. Energy remains intact. The system absorbs the deviation without reaction. This allows the behavior to repeat, to settle, to become precedent. The hunter moves on unseen and unchallenged. Its strategy appears intact. Invisibility remains absolute. But something fundamental has shifted beneath the surface. This was not avoidance forced by danger. It was avoidance chosen under pressure. The distinction matters. In open landscapes, success depends on reducing variables, not multiplying them. Instinct simplifies. Experience complicates. When experience begins to override instinct at the moment of action, timing becomes fragile. The hunter is not aware of this in any conscious sense. There is no recognition of error, no internal signal that something has gone wrong. The body simply adapts, storing the outcome as information rather than failure. This is how misalignment begins. Each time the sequence slows, each time the final movement is delayed, the threshold for commitment shifts. What once required alignment now requires assurance. What once demanded timing now demands certainty. Certainty does not exist here. The desert does not repeat conditions exactly. Wind changes, light shifts, prey adapts. Waiting for the perfect moment is equivalent to waiting indefinitely. Yet the hunter's restraint continues to refine itself, becoming more selective, more cautious, more removed from the immediacy that once defined success. The second missed opportunity does not feel like loss. It feels like preservation. That is what makes it dangerous, because preservation without reinforcement eventually erodes the ability to act at all. The hunter's world begins to narrow, not spatially, but behaviorally. Fewer moments feel acceptable. Fewer alignments feel sufficient. The window that once opened briefly now seems to close faster than expected. The desert remains unchanged. It does not respond to intention. It responds only to outcome. The hunter continues forward, invisible as ever, carrying a pattern that has not yet been tested by consequence, but will be. This is the first true deviation, not from success, but from timing. And in a system governed by timing above all else, even a slight misalignment can propagate quickly, reshaping every decision that follows. There is no sudden silence, no explosion of movement, no immediate punishment that forces correction. Instead, the land absorbs deviation quietly, allowing it to settle into the rhythm of survival until its effects become unavoidable. After the second withdrawal, nothing appears different. The hunter continues to move with the same restraint, the same economy of motion. Its outline remains unreadable against the terrain. Prey still drifts through the open land. Wind still shifts without pattern. To an outside observer, the system looks stable. Internally, pressure begins to accumulate. Hunger does not announce itself as urgency at first. It arrives as subtraction. Energy reserves thin slightly. Recovery takes longer. Muscles tighten more quickly after exertion. None of this demands immediate action, which makes it easier to ignore. This is how erosion works. The hunter compensates instinctively. Routes lengthen. Patrols stretch farther from familiar ground. Movement extends into periods that were once avoided, times when light is harsher, when attention is higher, when concealment requires more effort. Each adjustment is small, logical, defensible on its own. Together, they change the equation. Prey behavior has shifted as well. Scarcity has compressed movement into narrower corridors. Groups linger less. Feeding happens faster. Awareness sharpens sooner. What were once windows now feel like slits opening and closing without warning. The hunter still approaches. Distance still closes. But the final threshold, the moment where instinct once resolved everything, feels increasingly unstable. Alignment appears briefly, then dissolves. The body prepares, hesitates, recalculates. Not because danger is present, but because danger is possible. Possibility replaces immediacy. This subtle shift forces the hunter into longer periods of readiness without release. Muscles hold tension that does not convert into action. Focus sharpens around moments that never complete. The cost is not dramatic, but cumulative. Fatigue builds without exertion. There are nights when movement replaces rest, when the hunter travels simply because remaining still feels inefficient. Each step carries risk. Each sound carries farther in the cooling air. Invisibility must work harder than before, demanding precision from a body already compensating for depletion. Still nothing breaks. The desert offers no confrontation to clarify the situation. No failure dramatic enough to demand change. This allows the pattern to persist unchecked by consequence. The danger lies here. When behavior adapts without feedback, it drifts. The hunter's restraint, once calibrated to specific threats, begins to generalize. It applies caution where none is required. It delays action in moments that cannot afford delay. This is not fear. It is experience overshooting its usefulness. Each missed opportunity reinforces the same lesson. Withdrawal prevents exposure, but it does not reinforce what is lost. Calories not gained time, not recovered ground, gradually conceded to others moving through the same spaces. Competition becomes harder to avoid. Larger predators drift closer as movement concentrates. Scavengers linger longer. Prey reacts faster. The margins compress further, forcing the hunter into increasingly constrained choices. Avoidance now requires greater effort than engagement once did. Yet the pattern holds, because nothing has forced it to change. The desert excels at this kind of pressure. It does not challenge strategies directly. It waits until they exhaust themselves. The hunter moves on unseen, still alive, still functioning, but operating within a narrower and narrower range of acceptable decisions. This is the cost of hesitation when it repeats without correction. Not failure, not collapse, but gradual irrelevance. A strategy that once fit the land begins to lag behind it. The hunter does not recognize this consciously. It only senses that alignment feels rarer, that certainty feels fragile, that action increasingly demands more than instinct can provide. The system is approaching a threshold. Soon the desert will no longer allow quiet drift. It will compress conditions until choice becomes unavoidable, until restraint and necessity collide without room for negotiation. And when that happens, the consequences of this slow erosion will surface all at once. The land narrows again, funneling movement toward a shallow basin where prey has no choice but to pass. Heat presses down early, accelerating urgency on both sides of the exchange. There is less wandering now, less patience. Everything moves with purpose shaped by need. For the hunter, this should simplify the equation. The approach mirrors earlier moments almost perfectly. The same angles, the same distances, the same subtle shifts in wind that once signaled opportunity rather than risk. Memory recognizes the pattern, immediately drawing confidence from repetition. This is how it worked before. This is how it is supposed to work now. The hunter advances with controlled assurance, body low movement, smooth. The desert offers no immediate warning. No sudden sound fractures the quiet. No shadow breaks the horizon. Alignment appears to settle into place, fragile but real. Expectation returns, not hope, not hunger. Expectation, the belief that the sequence will resolve the way it always has. This belief is dangerous precisely because it feels earned. It is built from experience, reinforced by survival, validated by years of successful outcomes. The body prepares to commit. Then hesitation arrives again. This time it is not subtle. The pause extends just long enough to feel deliberate. The hunter holds tension at the threshold where action should replace thought. The memory of past exposure resurfaces with greater clarity, now reinforced by recent withdrawals that ended without consequence. Why rush? Why risk visibility when retreat has always preserved survival? The question does not form consciously. It is embedded in muscle memory, in the micro-delay that interrupts momentum. The hunter waits not for danger, but for reassurance that does not exist. The land responds. Prey shifts almost immediately, not into flight, but into readiness. Heads lift higher. Spacing tightens. Movement aligns toward escape routes. The basin that once offered containment now becomes a channel for dispersal. The opportunity degrades rapidly. The hunter still has a chance to act, but the cost has increased. The final distance must be closed faster. Noise is unavoidable. Exposure will follow. The calculation changes from can this succeed to can this succeed without collapse. The hesitation deepens. Instead of committing, the hunter withdraws again. This time the retreat is not clean. Movement accelerates slightly, breaking the careful rhythm that once defined invisibility. Dust lifts. Sound carries farther. The hunter escapes attention, but only just. Nothing pursues. Once again, the desert offers no immediate punishment. But something else has changed. The repetition of this pattern begins to reshape expectation itself. What was once an instinctive sequence approach, a line strike, has become conditional. Action now requires justification beyond alignment. Each hesitation reinforces the next, raising the threshold for commitment incrementally. This is how small errors multiply, not by escalating in size, but by narrowing options. Each repeated withdrawal teaches the body that restraint works even when it erodes opportunity. The hunter becomes exceptionally good at avoiding exposure and progressively worse at seizing moments that demand immediacy. The desert does not correct this imbalance. It allows it to persist until the environment itself shifts enough to make the strategy untenable. Scarcity tightens further. Movement compresses again. Opportunities become fewer and more volatile. The cost of delay increases with each cycle. Now when alignment appears, it feels unstable by default. The hunter senses this, though it cannot name it. The world feels faster, less forgiving. Timing windows close abruptly. Prey reacts sooner. Competition moves closer. The space to retreat shrinks as frequently as the space to act. Yet the pattern holds, because expectation lags behind reality. The hunter still believes at some level that another opportunity will arrive under better conditions, that patience will be rewarded, that restraint will preserve survival until alignment returns. But the desert has already moved on. The rules have not changed dramatically. They have shifted subtly just enough that waiting for the old alignment now guarantees delay rather than success. The hunter is responding to a version of the environment that no longer exists. This is the multiplication of error, not a single catastrophic decision, but a series of reasonable ones applied too late. Each hesitation compounds the last, not through punishment, but through misalignment with a changing system. The hunter moves on once more, unseen, unchallenged, alive. But now the cost is no longer abstract. Energy reserves are thinner. Routes are longer. Competition is closer. The margin that once allowed repeated withdrawal without consequence has narrowed to a fragile line. The desert has not turned hostile. It has simply stopped accommodating delay. The next moment will not resemble the ones before it. Expectation will fail where repetition once succeeded. And when that happens, the accumulated weight of these quiet decisions will surface not as confusion, but as urgency. The system is no longer drifting. It is converging. There is no dramatic shift in the land, no sudden change in light or sound to announce that the margin has finally collapsed. The desert looks the same as it always has, open, pale, indifferent. That is how it disguises thresholds, by making them appear ordinary. The hunter feels the difference first. Energy is low enough now to be noticeable, but not low enough to force recklessness. The body still responds. Muscles still hold tension. Movement is still precise. What has changed is the tolerance for delay. The window that once allowed hesitation without consequence has narrowed to something brittle, something that cannot bend again. Ahead, prey gathers near the last reliable corridor of movement left in this stretch of land. Not clustered, but close enough that vigilance overlaps. Attention is high. Escape routes are short and rehearsed. This is not an ideal situation. There are no ideal situations left. The hunter advances anyway. The approach is shorter than before. Not because confidence has returned, but because distance itself has become a liability. Every additional step increases the chance of detection. Every pause increases the cost of inaction. The body compresses against the ground, drawing closer to the land than it ever has, as if proximity alone could absorb risk. Alignment begins to form. Wind holds. Sound dissipates. Light flattens contrast just enough for movement to blur rather than stand out. For a brief, fragile instant, the old sequence feels possible again. Instinct rises, ready to reclaim its place at the center of the decision. And then memory intervenes, not as hesitation this time, but as conflict. The body wants to move. Experience wants to wait. Both signals arrive together, pulling in opposite directions. The hunter does not freeze. It advances slowly, deliberately, trying to satisfy both demands at once. This compromise is costly. The prey senses the shift almost immediately. Heads lift in unison. Muscles tighten. Attention sharpens across the group. The corridor that once promised containment becomes a channel for dispersal. The window begins to collapse. This is the last moment where restraint can still be justified. Withdrawal would preserve invisibility. It would prevent exposure. It would buy time the body desperately wants to conserve. But time is no longer available. Hunger presses harder now, not as discomfort but as urgency. The body recognizes the truth that experience has avoided acknowledging. There may not be another opportunity that allows even this much alignment. Waiting again does not preserve safety. It guarantees depletion. The hunter commits. The movement is not perfect. It cannot be. Fatigue pulls at balance. The ground gives less than expected. Sound travels farther than intended. The strike carries exposure with it, unavoidable and immediate. The desert responds. Prey scatters. Dust lifts. Movement fractures the stillness that once protected invisibility. The outcome is decided in seconds, not as triumph, but as survival. Whether the attempt yields food matters less than what follows. Withdrawal begins immediately. There is no pause to claim success, no lingering to assess the result. The hunter breaks away, abandoning the space before attention can solidify into pursuit. Shapes move at the edge of awareness. Sound carries. Risk condenses. The escape is narrow. It works not cleanly, not effortlessly, but enough. The hunter disappears again, folding back into the land with what remains of its energy. There is no chase, no confrontation. The desert absorbs the disturbance, as it always does, smoothing the surface, erasing the edges. What remains is consequence. The body is altered now. Energy is reduced, but pressure has eased slightly. The balance between restraint and necessity has shifted not toward resolution, but toward clarity. The hunter understands without thought, without language, that the old pattern cannot continue unchanged. This was not victory. It was adjustment forced by collapse. The desert did not reward the decision. It did not punish it either. It simply revealed the limit that had been approaching all along. The margin that once allowed hesitation without cost no longer exists. From this point forward, restraint and action must coexist without delay. The climax is not the strike itself. It is the realization that the system has changed, and that survival now depends on responding to that change without waiting for certainty. The hunter has crossed a threshold it cannot retreat from, not spatially, but behaviorally. The old rhythm is gone. What replaces it is fragile, incomplete, untested. A strategy born not from instinct alone, nor from experience alone, but from the collision of both under pressure. The desert does not acknowledge this shift. It never does. It only waits to see whether the adjustment will hold.